This is a very beautiful Dharma hall.
呢個係一個好美麗嘅禪堂。
We don't need to build.
我哋唔需要去建造一個禪堂。
There's plenty of air for us to breathe.
有好多空氣讓我哋可以呼吸。
Let us enjoy breathing with the sound of the bell offered by Sister Han Nghiêm.
讓我哋隨住行賢法師嘅鐘聲一齊呼吸。
Dear Sangha, today is the 19th of May, the year 2013. We are in the Lotus Plum Temple in Hong Kong for our Day of Mindfulness.
各位朋友，今日係2013年5月19號，我哋喺蓮池寺呢度有正念日。
We know that Queen Mahamaya did not have a hard time giving birth to Siddhartha.
我哋知道摩訶摩耶皇后生下悉達多太子嘅時候並唔辛苦。
In fact, the birth of Siddhartha was quite easy.
生下悉達多呢一個過程非常之容易。
The queen was on her way to her maternal home with the aim of giving birth to Siddhartha there.
皇后喺返回娘家嘅途中，誕下悉達多。佢係原本準備返到娘家之後生產悉達多。
Half the way home, she and the ladies in waiting just stop and enjoy themselves in the Lumbini Park.
喺半路中，佢同佢嘅隨從喺南毗尼園停落嚟休息。
I think she was doing walking meditation.
我諗當時佢係收集緊行禪。
And she enjoyed every step.
佢享受所行嘅每一步。
There are many Ashoka trees in the park.
喺南毗尼園嗰度有好多梭羅樹。
And they were in bloom.
有好多嘅空間。
So when she made the 7th step, she felt that Siddhartha is coming.
當佢行咗7步之後，佢覺得係時候生產佢肚入邊嘅孩子。
And that's why she grabs one of the branch of the Ashoka tree, and right away she gave birth to Siddhartha in the standing position.
於是佢掹住呢個梭羅樹嘅樹幹，即時佢喺企喺度嘅姿勢就誕下悉達多。
And the ladies in waiting, they were ready. They had everything they need in order to welcome Siddhartha.
佢嘅隨從已經準備好一切迎接悉達多。
That was a very happy moment for her and for all the ladies in waiting.
喺嗰一刻，佢非常之快樂，佢嘅隨從亦都非常之快樂。
So she did not have to go to her mother's home anymore. She decided to go back to Kapilavastu.
因此佢唔需要再返回佢嘅娘家，於是佢折返迦毗羅衛城。
A few girls have been asked to go quickly to both capitals in order to announce the birth of Siddhartha.
佢有幾位侍從率先返到去迦毗羅衛城，將呢一個好消息講俾皇宮聽。
When we think of Jesus Christ's birth, we see it differently. Mary was a refugee when she gave birth to Jesus Christ.
如果我哋睇返耶穌嘅出生係非常之唔一樣嘅，因為當時聖母瑪利佢係一位難民。
But when the time for Rahula, the son of Siddhartha, to be born, it was so difficult a time.
當悉達多嘅孩子羅睺羅出世嘅時候，分娩嘅過程係非常之困難。
Yasodhara had a very difficult time giving birth to Rahula.
耶輸陀羅分娩嘅過程非常之困難。
It took a long time in order to deliver the Buddha, the baby Rahula.
佢需要好長嘅時間先至生下羅睺羅。
And there was time when people were so afraid that both mother and son wasn't able to survive.
嗰陣時，好多人都非常之擔憂，擔心母子兩人都唔能夠活下來。
And Siddhartha was also very anxious, a lot of tension and worry in himself.
悉達多亦都非常之擔憂同埋焦慮。
And the whole royal family was in that situation. Everyone was extremely worried about the safety of Yasodhara and Rahula.
喺皇宮入邊，每一個人都非常之擔心耶輸陀羅同羅睺羅嘅安危。
You can see that during the time of conception of Rahula, Siddhartha was not happy.
我哋知道喺耶輸陀羅懷孕嘅時候，悉達多並不快樂。
Siddhartha had all the kind of facilities and conditions to enjoy as the life of a prince, but he was not happy at all.
悉達多有所有嘅條件，好享受佢嘅太子生活，但係佢並不快樂。
He recognized the suffering in himself. He recognized the suffering in his father and mother and the royal family.
佢覺察喺佢心入邊嘅苦痛，亦都覺察喺佢父母心中嘅痛苦。
He recognized the suffering in his own country.
佢亦都覺察佢國家嘅痛苦。
He saw very well that as a politician he cannot help remove that suffering from himself, from his family, and from his country.
佢知道作為一個政治家，佢唔能夠移去佢心中佢嘅家庭同埋佢國家嘅痛苦。
So he was not convinced that to be a king, to be a politician, he could help himself, he could help his family and country.
因此佢並不認為當佢成為皇帝嘅時候，佢可以幫到自己、佢嘅家庭同埋國家。
And he had a lot of anxiety, a lot of anguish, a lot of suffering in himself while living with Yasodhara.
佢喺同耶輸陀羅一齊生活嘅時候，心中有好多嘅不安同焦慮。
Yasodhara was an intelligent woman. She was aware of the suffering in her husband, but she could not see how she could help him at all.
耶輸陀羅非常之聰明，佢知道佢丈夫心入邊嘅痛苦，但係佢冇能力去幫助佢丈夫。
So the anxiety, the tension, the suffering of Siddhartha begin to enter into the body of Yasodhara and also into the fetus.
因此，悉達多心中嘅憂慮、焦躁，佢影響到耶輸陀羅同埋佢肚入邊嘅孩子。
The unrest in Siddhartha was very clear.
佢嘅悉達多心中嘅不安，讓佢非常之痛苦。
He had a lot of confusion, unrest. He did not have enough peace and joy within himself.
佢感到不安，感到混亂，佢心入邊並不感到平安自在。
He was trying to find a way out of this, and the idea of leaving home in order to be a monk was very strong in him.
佢嘗試尋找方法去解決呢一啲問題，因此佢心中非常之渴望成為一位僧人。
That is one of the reasons why the birth of Rahula was so difficult.
呢個就係其中一個原因，讓耶輸陀羅嘅分娩非常困難。
But finally, Yasodhara was able to give birth to Rahula, and the relief is total.
最終於耶輸陀羅都能夠誕下羅睺羅。
Siddhartha left not long after the birth of Rahula.
悉達多喺羅睺羅出世不久之後，佢就離開咗。
He spent many years searching for the way, learning from many teachers, and finally attained enlightenment by himself.
佢用咗好多年向唔同嘅老師學習，最終於佢自己達到覺悟。
And Siddhartha was doing that for all of us.
悉達多係為我哋所有人而做。
Siddhartha was doing that for his father, his mother, his family, his country.
佢為佢自己父親同埋佢國家達到覺悟。
When you become a monk or nun, you are doing it not only for yourself, but also for your family, your country, and your society.
如果你係一位僧尼嘅話，你所做嘅亦都唔係淨係為咗你自己，你為你自己、為你家人、國家而做。
Mankind was so lucky because Siddhartha had succeeded.
人類非常之幸福，因為悉達多成功咗。
He had found a way to deal with the suffering inside of him, in his family, and in his society.
佢揾到方法去處理佢心入邊嘅痛苦，同埋佢嘅國家社會入邊嘅痛苦。
He had found a way to release the tension within his body.
佢找到方法釋放佢身體嘅緊張。
He had found a way in order to calm down his painful feelings and emotions.
佢揾到方法去平息佢心入邊痛苦嘅感受同情緒。
He has found a way to understand the deep roots of suffering in himself and in other people.
佢揾到方法去了解佢痛苦嘅根源同埋別人痛苦嘅根源。
He has found a way in order to restore communication and bring about reconciliation with his loved ones.
佢揾到方法重建溝通，同佢愛嘅人和解。
And most of all, he has found a way to touch the nature of no birth and no death in himself and in reality.
而最重要嘅，佢係找到方法去接觸佢自己同埋實上不生不滅嘅本性。
He has done that not only for himself, but for all of us in the human race.
佢並唔係淨係為自己而做，而係為咗所有嘅人類。
Because the human race suffers, that is why other kind of other races, other species also suffer.
因為人類受痛苦，而令到所有嘅物種一樣都係受着痛苦。
When Neil Armstrong, the astronaut who made the first step on the moon, He declared that was a giant step for the humankind.
當太空人岩士堂首次踏足月球，佢發出呢一個聲明，佢話佢所行嘅呢一步係人類嘅一大步。
So Armstrong was making that step not for himself, but for all of us, the human race.
岩士堂所行嘅呢一步並唔係淨係為佢自己，而係為所有人類。
That is a big step on the path of modern science, technology.
呢一個係科技科學嘅一大步。
And as far as spirituality is concerned, that step was made by Siddhartha Gautama.
而對於明修嚟講，呢一大步係由悉達多踏出。
And today we celebrate his birth.
今日我哋慶祝悉達多嘅誕生。
And we look around and recognize that we have been transforming the Buddha into a god.
當我哋望一望周圍，我哋見到我哋將悉達多變化成一個神。
And we pray to him in order for him to help us to get what we want, like money, fame, profit, and health.
我哋祈求悉達多，祈求佛陀會帶俾我哋名利健康。
Siddhartha found out that true happiness does not come from money, fame, power, and sex.
而悉達多佢發覺到真正嘅快樂並唔係嚟自名利或者性。
But we are praying, we are asking him to give us all these things.
但係我哋祈求佢俾我哋所有呢啲一切。
The Buddha saw very well that happiness is possible and happiness is made of understanding and love.
佛陀睇得好清楚，幸福係嚟自愛同埋了解。
And he showed us the way in order to cultivate understanding and love so that we can have a happy life.
佛陀為我哋展示道路，去建立愛同理解，讓我哋能夠活得快樂。
In order to generate the energy of understanding and love, we have to practice mindfulness, concentration, and insight.
要能夠建立愛同理解嘅話，我哋需要去收集念定慧。
And that is the Buddhism of knowledge, the Buddhism of wisdom, and not the Buddhism of devotion.
呢一個係有智慧嘅佛教，而唔係信仰式嘅佛教。
Buddhism of our time is made mostly of devotion.
喺現代呢個社會，佛教大多數係信仰式嘅宗教。
The Buddha is no longer a teacher, but a god.
佛陀並唔係一位老師，我哋視佛陀為一位神。
We do not come to the Buddha with the intention to learn how to generate understanding and love and happiness.
我哋接觸佛陀並唔係為咗學習方法去建立理解同愛。
We go to the Buddha and to pray that he will help us to have more money, more fame, more profit, more success.
我哋去到佛陀嗰度祈求佛陀俾我哋更多嘅財富、名利。
We know that in the past, in the history of Buddhism, Buddhism was able to help bring peace and happiness in individuals, families, and nations.
我哋知道喺佛陀嘅時代，佛教係能夠為自己、家庭同埋社會帶嚟平安祥和。
And Buddhism has been able to go through many periods of transformations in order to continue to serve the humankind.
佛教經歷咗好多時代嘅轉變同埋改變，讓佢能夠喺呢一個時代仍然能夠服務社會。
But today Buddhism has been greatly corrupted.
但係喺呢一個時間，佛教已經唔再一樣。
We do not profit from the wisdom of the Buddha as much as our ancestors in the past.
我哋從佛教之中所得到嘅得益，並唔係再好似以前我哋祖先嘅一樣。
not many of us are able to go the path undertaken by our teacher, the Buddha.
我哋好多人都唔再跟隨佛陀以前所走嘅道路。
And that is why, as good Buddhists, as good disciples of the Buddha, we have to help renew Buddhism.
因此，如果你係一位好嘅佛教徒，一位佛陀嘅弟子，你應該去更新佛教。
We have to help purify Buddhism from superstitions and things like that corrupt, that have made Buddhism corrupted.
從迷信或者其他腐化佛教嘅條件之中，我哋要去淨化佛教。
It takes only a number of days, like 5 or 6, in order for all of us to learn how to release the tension in our body.
我哋只需要幾日或者係5、6日就能夠學習釋放身體嘅緊張。
It takes that amount of day in order to learn how to calm our painful feeling and emotions.
只需要幾日，我哋就能夠學到點樣去平靜心入邊痛苦嘅感受同情緒。
It needs only a number of days in order to learn how to generate a feeling of joy and happiness.
只需要幾日，我哋就能夠學到點樣去培養幸福快樂。
It needs only a number of days in order to learn how to understand the suffering in oneself and the suffering in the other person.
只需要幾日，我哋就能夠學到點樣去了解自己心入邊嘅痛苦，同埋別人嘅痛苦。
The other person may be our husband, our wife, our son, our daughter, our father, our mother.
對方可能係你嘅父母、子女或者伴侶。
Seeing the suffering in him or her help us not to be angry at him or her anymore.
當我哋見到佢心入邊嘅痛苦，我哋唔再嬲佢。
Seeing the suffering in the other person, we are no longer angry at him or at her.
我哋知道、了解到對方心入邊嘅痛苦之後，我哋唔會再去嬲佢。
And in fact, we want to do something or to say something in order to help him or her to suffer less.
反而我哋想去做一啲嘢，讓佢能夠減輕佢嘅痛苦。
And we can make use of the practice of compassionate listening and loving speech in order to help the other person to suffer less.
我哋可以利用愛語同埋慈悲傾聽，去幫助對方減輕佢嘅痛苦。
Practicing compassionate listening for 1 hour can already help the other person to suffer much less.
收集慈悲聆聽1個鐘頭，已經可以大大減輕對方嘅痛苦。
Listening like Kuan Yin, Bodhisattva, with compassion can help the other suffer less in 1 hour or so.
我哋好似觀音一樣慈悲聆聽1個鐘頭，已經可以減輕對方嘅痛苦。
And using the kind of loving speech in order to help the other person to speak out and to suffer less is something we can do after a few days of training.
只需要幾日嘅訓練，我哋就能夠用愛語去鼓勵對方講出佢嘅痛苦。
Restoring communication with the other person is possible.
我哋可以同對方重建溝通。
With the practice of compassionate listening and loving speech, we can very well restore communication in just a few hours.
只需要幾個鐘頭收集愛語同埋慈悲聆聽，我哋就能夠重建溝通。
To bring about reconciliation and to restore happiness and love is something possible with the practice given by the Buddha.
我哋用佛陀所教導嘅方法，能夠讓我哋去重建溝通，達成和解。
We have a number of sutras that are very practical and easy to understand.
有幾篇嘅經典係非常之容易理解同埋收集。
The sutra on the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness.
四念處經。
Mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of the feelings,
對於身體同感受嘅正念收集。
Mindfulness of the mental formations and mindfulness of the objects of our mind.
對我哋心行同埋我哋嘅心識嘅正念收集。
Practicing according to this sutra, we can have a deep insight about our body, our feelings, and our perceptions.
對我哋跟隨呢一個經典收集嘅話，我哋對我哋嘅身體、感受、想法會有好深刻嘅認識。
And practicing a few weeks, the teaching of the Sutra of Mindfulness can help us liberate ourselves from many wrong perceptions and afflictions.
我哋根據呢一個經典收集，只需要幾個星期就能夠移去我哋好多錯誤嘅觀念。
There's a sutra called the Sutra of Mindful Breathing, where the Buddha proposed 16 ways of breathing in and out.
而喺安波首義經之中，佛陀為我哋講解16項呼吸收集。
These exercises help us to release the tension in our body and to calm our feelings and our emotions.
呢啲收集幫助我哋釋放身體嘅緊張，平靜我哋嘅感受同情緒。
And these exercises also help us to generate a feeling of joy and happiness whenever we want to.
呢啲收集亦都讓我哋喺任何我哋想嘅時候，就可以培養到幸福快樂嘅感受。
And they help us to recognize the many conditions of happiness that are already available in the here and the now, so that we can be happy right here and right now, and do not have to go looking for happiness in the future.
亦都有我哋可以覺察到喺當下我哋已經擁有嘅快樂條件，讓我哋喺當下呢一刻就能夠感到快樂，唔需要去到未來追尋快樂。
With the final exercise in the Sutra of Mindful Breathing, we can touch the nature of no birth and no death in us, and transcend all kind of fear.
而呢一啲正念呼吸嘅練習，最後嘅練習，讓我哋能夠接觸到我哋不生不滅嘅本性，讓我哋能夠移去所有嘅恐懼。
There's a sutra the Buddha delivered to the businessman Anathapindika.
另外仲有一個經典係講述佛陀對於呢一個商人給孤獨長者嘅教導。
That day, the businessman Anathapindika came with 500 businessmen to visit the Buddha.
嗰日商人給孤獨長者，佢帶同500位其他嘅商人一齊去向佛陀參訪。
And the Buddha knew that business people, they think too much about future, and they do not have the time to live deeply the present moment.
佛陀知道商人往往係成日都諗住未來，佢哋冇真正地活在當下。
And that is why that morning the Buddha delivered a sutra on the topic of living happily right in the here and the now.
因此喺嗰一日，佛陀對佢哋嘅開示題目係幸福地安住於當下。
Hiện pháp lạc trú Drista Dhamma Sukha Vihara, that expression living happily in the present moment was repeated 5 times in the discourse.
願法樂住，幸福地活在當下，喺呢篇經典之中出現咗5次。
And that is why on this day commemorating the birth of Lord Buddha, we propose that courses should be given to adults and children on the learning and studies of these teaching and practices.
因此喺紀念佛陀嘅呢一日，我建議我哋開辦一啲課程，教導大家點樣去幸福地活在當下，教導佛陀所以前留低嘅經典。
And we will get the habit going to the temple not only to burn incense and do prostration, but to learn how to breathe, how to walk, how to cultivate understanding and love.
讓我哋建立習慣，去寺院唔淨係單止係叩頭燒香，我哋去到寺院學習正念呼吸、正念步行。
And 1 week of practice like that can transform our life and restore communication and happiness between us and the other people.
如此修習一日，已經能夠讓我哋得到轉化，亦都能夠讓我哋重建同其他人嘅溝通。
On this day, I would like to invite all of us to look for Shakyamuni as a teacher and not as a god.
今日我邀請大家一齊去尋找悉達多。悉達多係我哋嘅老師，而唔係一位神。
We always call him a teacher, root teacher, Bản sư.
我哋成日都稱呼佛陀為本師，
And yet we still worship him as a god.
但係我哋仍然尊崇佛陀，將佢視為一位神。
We have to learn how to profit from the Buddha as a teacher.
我哋要從事佛陀為一位老師，教導我哋之中得益。
And receive from him all the wisdom, all the teaching that can help us transform our life and the life of our family and society.
我哋喺佛陀身上睇到所有佢嘅教導，佢教導嘅修習方法，能夠讓我哋可以轉化自己同埋社會。